Hello, everybody. Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in on you. Hope everybody is uh, off to a good start today. Hope that you had a great week. I am going to attempt to be as brief as I possibly can here, but I think that it's important that we really truly talk about this. This would normally be a time of the day that I would be doing my morning motivation for the Visionetics Institute and the work I do in that area. But I want to talk to everybody that's tapped in on this particular topic. I want to talk about it because of the field I work in, because I deal in human behavior, because I deal in mental health, because I deal in performance from a mental, psychological, and spiritual perspective. That's what I do. I am seeing some things that are beyond alarming. I have been sounding the clarion for years, and unfortunately, things are getting worse instead of better. Now, as you know, for several months now, we've been running a week long fundraiser. The goal for that week long fundraiser 3 months ago was to raise $10,000 for the Black Men Lead Rite of Passage Initiative. We've just gone over $500 or so the last time I actually checked. The program goes, we do what we have to do for the community. We make it happen. But the thing is, the community does not support the work. The community highlights the work because people know we exist because they keep coming. So people know it exists and people are telling people about it and people are saying, hey, what a great job. But people in the community aren't getting behind it. And we have to stop depending on others to support and fund the things that are important. So we started the fundraiser. The goal was 10,000. If you can imagine the work it takes to create a socialization sorry about that. That's my wife. Um, we have to understand something. Let me tell you something. How this started was actually me trying to gain an understanding of what was going on with our proclivity towards violence, African American adolescent and young adult male violence. This started back in the 90s. Gaining an understanding. I looked at the work of Dr. Howard Stevens at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Joy Dr. Joy DeGruy at the University of Oregon, and University of Portland, and started to look at their work and how they were working together. And I decided to jump on that and ride it and then see where I could expand on it and branch out from it. And that's how I came up with Black Men Lead. Because what I found is that there are 5 primary contributors to African American adolescent and young adult male violence. 3 of them are prevalent in almost every Black community. The first one is what's called urban hassle. Urban hassle are the things that every kid in the inner city faces. Sirens and gunfire in the middle of the night, navigating through gang violence and dope activity to get to school and home from school. If you live in the Middle East, if you live in the Midwest or the East or the Northeast, L trains running all time of the night. Drug activity in your building and so much more. Those are there. Every kid deals with them, but those are influencers. They literally influence and increase risk of the tendency to become violent. But what we found, the 2 most prevalent influencers are, number 2 is the lack of proper racial socialization. Number 1 is the fear of being disrespected. When they feel disrespected, they're at the height and the greatest risk to perpetuate an act of violence. Dr. Joy DeGruy was the first to come up with an African American adolescent respect scale. What is a scale? A scale in psychology or in human behavior is something that you can use. It's questions, it's observations, it's a systematic protocol approach to observing someone to determine when they're going to behave in a certain way. So to determine the risk of a person becoming violent, there's the scale. You can tell by asking questions, by making observations, by paying attention to a kid when they're at a higher risk of committing violence. That was great. So we got that, but then we understood the one thing that we can control. We can implement socialization processes. Every other major race or ethnic group has it. The Jews have the bar mitzvah, which is actually a celebration of a process that every Jewish kid goes through to get to a certain point where they're trained what is expected of them as being a male in that particular ethnic group or racial group. We have no universal rite of passage. So I created Black Men Lead. Black Men Lead is a rite of passage. Now, my goal has been to get it to a point of becoming a universal rite of passage. That may mean at some point in time that it may have to merge with other great minds or other people with ideas of what may need to be added or and sometimes subtracted to create the ideal situation. But I looked at roles of a Black man, the definition of a Black man. One of the biggest things that I find problematic is there is no universal definition of what Black manhood looks like. Some men are being judged by their bank account. Some men are being judged by their sexual prowess. Some men are being judged by so many other different things that no one can truly define what manhood is because no one has established it and no one has set the standard and no one is being held accountable on a universal level. Well, that's one of the things that we need to be doing. We need to be setting a standard. Why is that important? Number one is when you don't have a standard, when you don't have a sense of identity, and you don't have a way of defining what something is, then you leave people to try to figure it out. You leave people to try to figure out what manhood is, what Black manhood is, what it looks like. And then when you talk about 1.5 million Black men missing in the Black community, there's a void of Black manhood. There's a void of modeling manhood. Then there's an erroneous idea of what manhood is. It's you've got people out there thinking that when I pop a cap, that makes me a man. When I end up getting a bid or doing a bid for something stupid, that makes me a man. When I am able to exact absolute horror and terror in my community, I will misinterpret fear as respect because I have not yet gained an understanding of what true manhood is. I haven't understood or developed an understanding or a perspicacity of the fact that real manhood is something that shows up and in the way of protection, in the way of provision, in the way of leadership, in the way of wisdom, in the way of guiding, in the way of being out front so that nothing touches the things that are precious to us without having to go through us. And the number one principle in the rite of passage program for Black Men Lead is no Black man should ever bring harm to a Black woman, emotionally, psychologically, and definitely not physically. And that's the first. And there are many more. There's a principle of business ownership. There's a principle of intentional growth. There's a principle of brotherhood. There are principles. The problem here is that our young Black males are literally imploding. And I'm not just talking about violence against one another or violence against others in the community. They're killing themselves. I mean, suicide is spiking among young Black males. We're talking about a crisis. Over the last 6 months, I have taken in more young Black males in the last 6 months than I've probably taken in the last 5 years. We're in crisis. And there is no set recourse or no set response or no protocols in place to deal with it. We're in crisis. We have young brothers who are breaking and they don't know where to go. They don't know who to turn to. They don't know what to do because we have not created the proper space, the proper resources, or we're not funding the resources when they are available. It's no way with the work that's been done and the number of people who say they believe in what I do by subscribership, by emails, by comments, by all the different ways that I get this. And you can't not believe in me if when you're sending people to me, because a lot of you are reaching out and you're sending people to me. With that being said, you can't say you believe in something and then you not get behind it. It doesn't make sense. Now, my thing is, I have invested more than 30 years into understanding the enigmatic issues that we face as a community. I have written 24 books, in the process of writing 25 and 26 as we speak. Got sidetracked a little bit with a lot of other things going on. Number one, this increase in influx of young Black males in crisis. Now, this does not even take into consideration that we're still dealing with an unbelievably high level of Black women in crisis, Black women dealing with depression, Black women dealing with trauma, whether it's from childhood trauma and abuse or domestic abuse, intimate partner violence, and so many more things that are going on. Those things are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. But what we're seeing is now we're seeing the falling out of not having properly engaged young Black males. The Black Man Lead program is a program. We start at 4 years old and we go to 13. At 13, you cross over. You move into now the development of what you have learned is required of you. Now you start to act on it. You start to move into it. You start to gradually grow into it. You are now being held accountable for behaving the way you have been taught and trained to behave. We need you to be pro-social. We need you to be pro-Black. We need you to be powerful. We need you to be a protector. We need you to be a provider. We need you to be on your A game, because you're already out there in a world that is inherently hostile towards you. There has to be an understanding that we can't continue to move the way we're moving as a people. And we can't continue to move in the way that we're moving with our young Black males not having proper leadership and guidance and modeling of what it takes to be a man. We're also going to have to understand that when a Black man says he's tired, we need to believe him. As Brother Jason Wilson has said in his book, Battle Cry, we need to understand that everybody has a breaking point. We need to understand that it needs to be a safe space where a man can have a space to say, hey, I'm hurting. Hey, I'm feeling inadequate. Hey, we say we're good so much that we're believing it, and we're starting to normalize dysfunction as being functional because we keep saying we're good. And the truth of the matter is we're not. Hey, dog, what's up? I'm good. Hey, man, how you doing? I'm good. Hey, man, how you feel? I'm like, I have to tell my friend, hey, man, there's no way you're good all the time. I've been doing this mental health thing. I've been doing this personal performance thing. I've been doing this thing, what I do for a living, for decades. And I'm not good all the time. Do I show up every day? Yes, I know how to show up every day, but I have to tap into somebody. I have to talk to somebody. You need to be able to talk. And we are in such a competitive mode that there's no one to turn with, because everybody's trying to beat you. Everybody's trying to be better than you. Everybody's trying to prove that because that's what we've been pitted against one another. It's only so much out there. So the Black man has to prove he's better than other Black men, because we need unity. That's another principle that we teach to young Black males. I agree, Tony. Tony Lindsay says people cannot discern the difference between Black manhood and the white supremacist interpretation of it. They also continue to mislabel the response to constant abuse as toxic. And it's funny that you mentioned toxic, Tony, because when you start to talk about that, we start to look at the way that quote unquote mainstream media, white supremacy has worked to mistag masculinity, period. So now when you start talking about toxic masculinity, what you do is you do a subtle attack on masculinity in general. The truth of the matter is there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. The things that people are calling toxic is toxic behavior. It has nothing to do with masculinity. Masculinity in and of itself is pure. Masculinity in and of itself is simply the expression of who you are in your manhood. It is the expression of who you are in your natural state. It cannot be corrupted. Now, what you can do is have your behavior corrupted, but masculinity is an expression of who you are. And what we've done when we label it toxic masculinity, then we start to attack natural behaviors of men. We talk about it now. I look at when I'm working with little boys, and you go into the school district, you know, the thing now is they don't want little boys roughhouse and playing. I know when I grew up, we used to roughhouse, we used to play, we used to slap box in the bathroom. Now you can literally get suspended for school for doing any of those things. Why? Because it's considered aggressive. Well, no, that's what has happened throughout the annals of time back to ancient humanity, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, is young males. You watch it with any species of animal, young males are grappling with each other. What are they doing? They are developing their skills to do what they were designed to do. And the first and most primitive and primal push, an instinctive push on manhood, is to protect. And all of a sudden, now when black men rise up and say, I'm going to protect, I'm going to stand my ground, it scares the hell, first and foremost, out of white people. Number two, it has, because we're so confused, we double down and challenge it, because we've been told to be docile. We've been told to be conformative. We've been told to be compliant. And in no way were we ever told that that was a part of us that explained the aggression that the natural aggression that comes with the rise in testosterone when we're moving into puberty. Let me explain something to you. One of the things that fathers are meant to do with their sons, and because we have an absence of fatherhood and many of the fathers never had fathers, so they don't know what to do. But one of the major things that you're able to do, one of the things that my great grandfather, who was my adopted father, did for me, and what I did for my children, is this: when you see your child going through puberty, you need to explain some things. See, puberty is major. It's a major teaching point when you want to teach a black male or any male of that time, but we're talking about young black men. Now, if you want to teach them a very powerful point about manhood, here it is right now. You're going through puberty. What's happening? Your voice is starting to change. First, it starts to crack, then it starts to get deeper. What else is happening? You're starting to grow and get bigger than your female counterpart the same age. Where up until this point, you were probably same size, same strength. You probably raced in the streets, and she probably beat you sometime because you didn't have an advantage yet. But all of a sudden, here comes this testosterone thing. This testosterone thing changes your, like I said, your voice, your muscular development. You're more prone to develop muscular. You're getting stronger, but something else happens too. You become a little more edgy. You become a little more aggressive. Well, why is that? This is what we tell our boys. This is not for you to become aggressive towards your counterpart that you've been rolling with and been equal to physically to that point. This is for you to be in a position to not only be physically capable of protecting her, but being mentally, emotionally, and psychologically willing by way of this natural aggression. The aggression isn't meant to be out of control. The aggression is meant that when it's time to step up, you don't fold. When it's time to step up, you don't back up and cower. When it's time to step up, there's a natural part of you that's ready to go out there and get it. Your woman and your sister and your mother needs to know that you're going to do it. It's amazing that we sit here and we hear black women saying constantly over and over again, I don't feel safe in the presence of black men. And we're study trying to get black men to back down and be still. One thing that a woman needs to know is that I'm safe. Now, she needs to know it in a number of different ways, not just physically. She needs to know financially that you're going to hold her down. And if you're not there yet, you need to be fighting to get there. That's the thing. No one is exactly where they need to be. Everybody is in a position of growing and becoming better. If you're not, that's where you're losing the fight. There needs to be a deliberate and intentional movement towards being a better person tomorrow than you are today. And if you do that every day, when you get to next year, you won't even recognize the person that's here now, because you'll be a completely different person. That's how you grow. That's how you become better. That's what we teach our boys. But let me tell you something. We cannot adhere to an idea or a notion or a Eurocentric idea of our manhood. They don't have the ability, the right, or the capacity to define our manhood. Our manhood comes from our history, it comes from our heritage, but it also comes from our experience. No one has had the experience that we have had. No one has went through and done and had to go through. Nobody had to walk and move through. And when they see a white man drop their head because they weren't allowed to look him eye to eye, that was our experience. There is a paper written by Daniel Patrick Moynihan called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. It became more affectionately known as the Moynihan Report. It was about the state of the black family in the mid-60s and what needed to be done. Moynihan told them not create social programs and shape social programs like welfare, like all these other programs, and subsidize the black woman, but to use those millions of dollars that they were going to use to subsidize black women and children to give jobs to black men and let black men take care of black women. They didn't listen to it. But there's a part in this report that Moynihan wrote where he says that the natural instinct of the male is to strut. He says from the 4-star general to the bantam rooster, the male struts, except for the black man. When the black man has the audacity to hold his head up, he is told, sit still, you cocky nigger, or you'll get lynched. So that's where the black man is coming from, where he has had his manhood quelched for centuries. And yet there's a need for his black manhood to present itself. His wife and the women in the community need him to present. His daughters need him to present. His sons need him to present. His brothers need him to present. You have to get that, man. Tony, man, I love lions. And Tony makes the reference to lions. The male lion is the most gentle and caring towards his lioness, but he will rip the head off of any of the animal tribe. And that, if you study the lion and you study lion prides, what you find is most of the time the females hunt. They're faster and more agile. He's bigger, he's stronger. But guess what? When they hunt and kill, he eats first. Why? He's there to protect them. Now he can hunt and he's a beast with it. I've seen male lions take down giraffes. It's amazing. What they do is they go behind them and they jump up and they stick their claws in their back legs and they just ride down and they just keep ripping that thread till they can no longer stand. And when they come down, they get to where they get to that esophagus and they suffocate them. I've seen male lions back down crocodiles in their territory. They're in the water and the male is walking into the water and the crocodile's backing up. He's letting those women drink. He's saying, try it if you want to. That is the role of the man, to protect. See, and one thing is, what happened is, and I'm almost done. What happened is when they decided to subsidize the black woman and say, we're going to give you this, this, and this, but you can't have the black man in the house. What they did is they commodified the black man. They placed the primary focus of black manhood on whether or not you could take care of your family by yourself. If you couldn't, then you weren't really a man. And at the same time that they were saying, okay, you need to be take care of your man, they took away the means to do so. See, before the 60s and 70s, the black man could work at a place like Ford and Chrysler and all the other GM plants. It was inside the city of Detroit and other close areas. And they can make a living there that the average person couldn't have. They were making good livings. They were being able to support their families. They were putting them in nice homes. They were buying up homes. That's why when you look at Detroit now and you look at what was there, that was predominantly black-owned home ownership because the blacks had them bought the city. But look at what happened. Not just with the automobile industry, but in all industries, they deindustrialized the inner city. What does that mean? that took away the means of not having a college education and still making a good living. They made it more difficult. Then what else did they do? They start taking things like auto mechanics and wood shop and plumbing and electrical work out of the high schools. Why? Because you had blacks coming out of high schools being able to get jobs as apprentices, or some others to get jobs, and then eventually open up their own companies. And they did that. So what happened? They reduced the capacity of the black man to provide. And then they sold the narrative that is his only responsibility, is to provide. Oh, it's a major responsibility. The Bible says that who does not take who does not provide for his own, especially those of his household, is worse than an infidel. You're supposed to provide, but let me explain something to you. The black man does more than that. I did a video series on the 5 P's of black manhood. The first and foremost is protect. First and foremost is protect, then provide, then promote. See, it is about lifting and edifying and elevating those who you cover. It's about encouraging. It's about inspiring. It's about giving advice. It's about giving a leadership. And when you provide more than money. You provide advice. You provide leadership. You provide a covering. You provide so much more. That's you create a space. It's so important that we teach this, and we're not. And then we're expecting these young kids to grow up and just know. We're expecting them to just grow up and know. And when they do something, our response is, oh my God, that's sad, shaking my head, that's horrible, they need to burn in hell, all of these things. But the problem is, we didn't do anything to prevent it. We didn't do anything to stop it. We didn't do anything to change it. These programs are here. Socialization program. I'm telling you, Black Man Lead should be a national network of universal rite of passage that every black male in America should be undergoing, so that they know, number one, is what they're going to face as black men, what is expected of them as black men. How do they carry themselves as black men? How do they treat women as black men? What are their responsibilities to their children as black men? What are their responsibilities to one another as black men? That should be unknown. It should be understood. That's why we're so far behind, because the Jews are doing it. The Arabs are doing it. The Asians are doing it. Latinos are doing it. We're the ones that are just simply saying, throw them out there and let them figure it out. Hell, we want to push them out the house at 18. But we haven't even prepared them to that point. We have work to do. We absolutely have fallen. And when I sit up and I started that fundraiser several months ago, it was a week-long fundraiser, raised $10,000. Man, we can spend that on kids in a week. People don't really give consideration to what it costs to run these programs. And like I said, I've got people contacting me every week, and they want and need help. Let me give you another shot. Since forget the violence, we talked about the violence. Let's talk about something else that you should definitely be worried about. And it's not just impacting black males. When I don't talk about black males, then I'm gonna talk about blacks in general. From 2013 to 2019, there was a 47% increase in suicide among young black males between the ages of 14 and 24. 47%. I have currently been contacted by 3 families over the past 2.5 months who had kids who killed themselves. And there's concerns where there were other kids, males, who were having suicidal ideations, thoughts of killing themselves. That's real. Here's another one that ought to really hit home. The last I checked, and it could have changed, but the last I checked, blacks are actually leading in a suicide statistical category. And it's the most horrible one that we could possibly be leading in. Children between the ages of 5 and 11, and they're primarily girls. Y'all might want to watch out for that social media, especially Instagram. But And that's that's a professional opinion. That's from my research and understanding the impact of social media on our kids, and specifically Instagram on females. We've got work to do. We can sit up and we can smooth through it. And the problem is, somebody asked me, well, don't you think because you've been able to do this, and don't you think you've been, and then we have somebody that I admire. I don't know if Tony's still on here because I'm not showing him, but Tony Lindsay is a filmmaker. He had a very good film. His first film was Off the Chain. He is a successful person. And I know a bunch of other successful persons. One of my closest friends, Dr. Michael Blanchard. We've been riding together for some years now, successful. I know a bunch of people, and over my life, I know a bunch of people. And so people say, well, you got all these people that you know, and you're successful and they're successful. So doesn't that mean that, we've made it? No, it doesn't mean we've made it. I am still a rarity. And my response is always, as long as I remain an anomaly, I have failed. I have failed to follow through and finish what I'm started. So the beautiful thing about failure is it isn't final until you quit. I haven't quit. So my goal is to empower my people. And that comes with a hefty price tag. People talk a bunch of stuff. People talk about what they're doing and all that. And everybody wants pats on the back and everybody. I'm telling you, when you're really out there and you got your heart in it, you're going to give something up. It's going to take a piece of you. It just is. And you got to be willing to make that sacrifice. You got to be willing to go all out. You got to be willing to give it whatever you have. And that's how I live my life. I don't take on anything that I'm not going to give 100% to. And I have fought hard for this, and I will continue to fight hard for it. But what I'll tell you is, you can sit up and talk about something that has little or nothing to do with anything, but it's sensationalized. So-and-so said this about that person. So-and-so said, and you get 50 million shares, 50 million likes. You start to talk about changing things and real true action. Viewership drops drastically. Interaction drops drastically. Response. People want to comment 50 million ways a Sunday about bull crap. But when it's about change, everybody gets quiet. And as long as that's the case, we will never win. So once again, I'm here. I'm calling you out. I'm calling you and I'm challenging you to action. It is time that we do something. Our boys are in crisis, and honestly, our kids are in crisis, period. Our kids have no idea who they are. Our kids have no idea where they're going. Our kids have no idea of what to expect out of life. They just want to exist. They don't have very high standards as a general rule. They just want to get out there and they want to go. They want to be influencers. They want to be, and it's nothing wrong with being an influencer. If you got a plan and you got something to offer and you bringing something of value, go do it. But to sit up and think that all I got to do is be cute and I'm going to make it on Instagram, all I got to do is be cute and I'm going to make it over here, that's not how it's going to happen. What we're going to actually have to do is start owning our own mess. I've talked about this for I don't know how long. That one of my favorite quotes is an African proverb that says, if there's no enemy on the inside, the enemy on the outside can do us no harm. We've got too many things that we haven't dealt with internally. And it makes us vulnerable to so many of the machinations and mechanisms that are set up to take us down. We haven't strengthened ourselves internally, emotionally, psychologically. We haven't prepared ourselves. We are not preparing our children. We are failing our children miserably. But we get on social media and we capping about what we got, what we driving, and our children are miserable. A bunch of you got kids and you don't even know what's going through. They keep telling you and you keep dismissing them. I know because they end up in front of me. This is my challenge. We need to come together. I would love to take Black Men Lead national. Now, I've got a bunch of people that I've contacted, that I've helped, that have gotten, some things going in their city, but I'm talking about national. I'm talking about creating a network where the people in Atlanta are dealing with the people in Chicago, the people in Chicago are dealing with the people in New York, people in New York dealing with people in Dallas and Houston and LA, and everybody's connected to everybody, and it's a national network, so we can connect in a once or twice a year. We can bring all these kids together in a national convention, and we can look at work we're doing. We need to do this. I can't express it enough. I'm going to close out on something that I've been saying for a long time. People ask me, how are we going to become empowered? And I say, what we're going to need are men. And I say specifically men because we're supposed to be leaders. I said, we're going to need men who are willing to plant seeds that they may not live long enough to see come to fruition. What does that mean? We live in a world where Black men aren't celebrated that often. And when they're celebrated for doing things that aren't that really spectacular. What they do physically on a basketball court or football field. What kind of whip they're driving. I'm talking about Black men that are making a difference, Black men that are building something, Black men that are holding up their families, Black men that are loving their wives. They're not celebrated. And because Black men aren't celebrated, Black men look for ways to be celebrated. So we're not looking for the true win. We're looking for the Band-Aid that looks good, that gives us our little pat on the back right now. That's not how we're going to win. We're going to have to invest in a generation of kids that by the time they actually start walking out what we trained them and prepare them and protected them to do, some of us may not be here, or we may be up in age and pushed to the side and maybe to the back. And we got to be okay with that. It's going to require that we plant seeds that we may not live long enough to see come to fruition. But if we plant them and we protect them and we water them and we cultivate them and we get them set up and we leave them in a place where they come into their own, so they don't think like we thought as a generation. They think differently. They move differently. They operate differently. They don't fall for the same okie doke. They're not tied down politically to any group that does not provide for them what they need and what they demand. They're not set up and caught up in begging and asking for anything. They are looking for ways to do things on their own. And when we train them to do that, and we prepare them to do that, and we insulate them from that Eurocentric idea of what is, what's beautiful, what's smart, what's intellectual, what's classy, what's professional, all these different things, and then they're trying to adhere to it, but it doesn't naturally measure or align with who they are because it's not built for them. They won't move towards that. They're going to fight and stand in their own Blackness, in their own uniqueness, in their own power. But we've got to be willing to plant those seeds pretty early. And then we got to be willing to protect them and insulate them until those seeds take root. See, we might be telling our kids some good stuff, but we immediately expose them to the anti. And then when we expose them to the anti rips it out, plucks it up, says, no, we're going to plant this. Your nose should look like this. You're more important if you're lighter complected. Your hair should be straight. You need to dress like this. You need to do this. And then there they go. You need to teach self-love. You need to teach self-empowerment. You need to teach the absolute force that's within that nobody has a right to take and nobody can take if you really truly know who you are. It's only when we're suffering from an identity crisis that we get robbed. Time is up. So once again, I'm going to challenge you. We started this thing over 3 months ago for 1 week to raise $10,000. We haven't even gotten to 1,000 yet. In fact, we just got over 500. I'm challenging you today. Let's do something different. Let's make something happen. And finally, for those of you who have people who need help, the information to reach me will be in the description box of the video, no matter where you're watching it. You can get at me through any other platforms, but definitely you need to get at me. We are doing whatever we can to get to people as quickly as we can with the resources we have, but we don't want you out there thinking you're alone. We don't want you out there thinking that you can't make it. We want to be a resource, and we're hoping to be an expanding and growing resource in the coming weeks, in the coming months, in the coming years. That's the challenge. On that note, I'm out of here. Everybody have an unbelievable day.